welcome to another episode of Ask the Wizard, streaming live almost daily. Stop doing what you've been told. Now that's interesting. All right, starting the 5-minute timer. Now get comfortable. See you in 5. Hey everyone, how are you doing? Welcome to another episode of Ask the Wizard, streaming live almost daily. Just let me turn this down a little bit. Stop doing what you've been told. Now, us, man, I tell you, us humans, we are interesting creatures. Here's something I see, and I know you've seen it too. Facebook. How, oh goodness, I remember there was one, this would have been in the wintertime or maybe even late spring, and there was this picture of this massive pileup on Highway 2. So Queen Elizabeth now, I still call it Highway 2, between Edmonton and Calgary here in Alberta. And people, so it was posted, and people were commenting, boy, I hope everyone is okay. And if you're, avoid that highway. So they're commenting on all this stuff. But if you open the picture, yes, it was a pile up. And yes, it was on Highway 2, but it was from last year. And I see this so much is that folks will look at the picture or look at the kind of the little bit of preview text or something like that. And that's it. No further than that. Or the whole thing about, I'm sure you've seen this too, it's usually movie stars, how some of them have died like 8 times over. Post comes out, oh my goodness, and then there's all these condolences thing. Well, it turns out they're doing just fine. And it's almost like we choose not to think for ourselves, I think, in many ways. What really brought this to mind was, so I am 61 and a half, have zero medical issues, conditions, syndromes, all that kind of stuff. At least I did have until actually a week ago today. And so then it turns out, make a long story short, did a stress test and seen a cardiologist, and oh my God, the words he used was your blood pressure is dangerously high. Now, remember, this is my first experience with like personal, as being on the receiving end of the healthcare system. And even just in this week, I've got some interesting thoughts about that. Nothing really different than so many of you have already experienced, unfortunately. Not that there's anything wrong with them per se. It's just they're so incredibly understaffed and under-resourced. But anyway, and so, okay, so we sit down. He says, this is what you got to do. Start now. Okay. All right. So I'm just sort of digesting that. And then there's the commonly agreed upon reasons for it. There's a commonly agreed upon things you do, things you don't do, all that kind of stuff. And then I started researching. And this is what I do when I'm researching something, and learning something, I guess you would say as well, is I research the whole spectrum, like from all the way over here to crazy land, from all the way over here to crazy land, because I find by sort of exploring all avenues, no matter how bizarre they may appear to me, what I find is you'll find that common theme or that common denominator. And that's what I look for. And that's one of the things, and so in doing that, you start to find out that there's some myths, if you will, that even as a society, that we just assume, or this is the way it is. And then we follow that assumption. And I'm not trying to get all conspiracy theorist or anything like that, although I'm sure that plays a part of it, but with the best of intentions, right? Even the quote unquote experts may not be kind of the quote unquote experts. I remember watching, it was a symposium on neuroscience or something like that, and I can't remember the details. It was quite a while ago, but basically there was even DNA, although I think it's slowly changing. I mean, not that long ago, your DNA was your DNA. There's nothing you can do about it. If you're genetically disposed to this, if you're genetically disposed to high blood pressure, there's nothing you can do about it. And when you listen to the researchers that are on the leading edge of this stuff, there is like mountains of peer-reviewed evidence that now it doesn't even suggest, it's like validated that that's not true. I mean, maybe it was then with the level of knowledge that we had, but as our knowledge and understanding increases, those truths change. And the guy was saying, he was a smart guy, and he said, this is now proven. I'm not just saying DNA, it was something else, can't remember what it is, to do with our physical body. And he says, this has now been proven that what they're teaching in the schools isn't right. It's now proven over and over and over again. And so the commentator kind of said, so why? And the guy said, unfortunately, he says, because it's easier. Thought that was interesting. And then the fella said, so what will it take to change this? And it was an interesting response he gave. It was one funeral at a time, because it's almost like, even though there's that truth has been proven, and even though the people, have said that know it, they know. Sorry, that's just my sister. I just got. They know that that's not the case, right? Sorry, didn't mean to. It's just easier. It's easier to do the same thing, even though this is my whole thing on bureaucracy. It's easier to just keep doing the same thing rather than try and institute change. Yeah. But there she is. And so for me, it was, as I researched this, I discovered, well, some of these, and this is just one, and again, this is just me and what I've discovered, is one of the things that, and again, they've got all the research and the studies to back this up. And this is just me, right? Is, at least from what I understand, one of the big things was salt, right? Too much salt raises your blood pressure. And it's kind of interesting reading and researching where that came from, and that there's all sorts of, again, peer-reviewed evidence and studies and stuff to show that's not true, right? The other one is caffeine. That, caffeine is the big demon. And again, this is just me, and again, everything within reason, right? It's not like if you kind of eat tablespoons of salt, it's going to be a good thing, right? But they're not the demons that, at least for me, we were understood that they were. Caffeine's the same thing. Again, if you drink 3 pots of coffee, yeah, but in balance, right? And so how does this relate to sort of my genre? This is something that I've really been diligent in, is in telling you guys, my students, the folks that coach and stuff like that, is don't take my word for it. Here's some information, here's some suggestions maybe, here's some ideas, here's some options, this is kind of my way of seeing things, but don't just take that at face value. Do your research. You figure out for you what works for you, because this is the huge thing, is we're not all the same. And so the ways that work from an energy perspective that work really good for me may not work worth a damn for you. And so for me, that's why it's so important to not just take what you've been told and just do it because, hey, Cheryl, how you doing? Because you've been told to do it, or because the experts say to do it. Because you know what? The experts are just people like you and me too. And one thing I do know is that, and one of the guys I was listening to, he talks about the way science is supposed to work is you take an hypothesis, you use the understanding that you have to either validate it or refute it, right? But at the same time, you know that what is true for you today may not be true tomorrow, because as our awareness grows, as using a medical perspective, as sort of the understanding, the knowledge, the research, all that kind of stuff continues to evolve, so do these truths. And I don't care who you are, none of us know everything. And so for me, don't just do something because you've been told to do it, right? So in my case, of course, the first thing he did was subscribe medication sitting right up over there. Now, for now, I'm going to take it, right? But that doesn't mean, and that's why for me too, I'm not saying for 1 second that we go and burn every hospital down. Thank God they're there, right? As under-resourced as they are. Wow. But at the same time, I'm doing my research. So what does that really mean when they say you have high blood pressure? What does that really mean? What are the mechanics behind that? And what can I do about it? Right? Not just take like what the one person says, the must-dos, the have-to-dos, all that kind of stuff, right? You do your research. You figure out what works for you. And the same thing goes in the genre that I'm focused on, right? One spiritual practice that works for me may not work for you. Spiritual practice that works for you may not work with a damn for me. But that's your job, is to figure out the way or ways that work for you. That's it, guys. Not too terribly long today, but it's so important. It's so important to remember that it's your job. Do your research. Don't just take somebody else's word for it. I think we're maybe kind of lazy a little bit in that way. You think for you. You figure it out. Figure out the ways that work for you. So important. What's your truth? You figure out your truth. Maybe the same as mine, maybe different. I don't know. It's not, you live your life. I live my life, and yes, we'll share some commonalities, but we're also unique in every way and in many ways. We're also the same, right? We're all in this walk together, but we're walking our own individual paths together. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in. Share. We're all in this together. See you on the web.